The fluorescent lights of Incheon International Airport felt harsh against Maya's exhausted eyes as she clutched the wrinkled paper with an address that promised everything: a job, a home, a future. She had left everything behind in Nairobi, sold her grandmother's jewelry to afford the plane ticket, and spent the entire flight imagining her new life in Seoul. But the man who was supposed to meet her never came. His phone went straight to voicemail, and when she finally found a taxi driver willing to take her to the address, her stomach dropped. The building was abandoned, windows broken like missing teeth, walls covered in faded graffiti that seemed to mock her naivety. Maya stood on that empty street with her single suitcase and felt the full weight of her mistake crushing down on her shoulders. She had been scammed, completely, thoroughly, devastatingly scammed. The recruiter who had seemed so professional in their video calls, who had shown her photos of a clean apartment and promised a monthly salary that seemed too good to be true, had disappeared with the advance payment she had sent. $3,000. Every cent she had saved over 2 years of working double shifts at a hotel in Nairobi. Gone. And now she was alone in a country where the alphabet looked like art instead of letters, where her brown skin drew stares that made her feel like an exhibit in a museum, and where the September chill cut through her thin jacket like she was made of paper. But Maya had not survived growing up in Kibera, one of Africa's largest slums, by giving up when things got hard. Her mother had raised her alone after her father died, working as a house cleaner and a vegetable seller, and anything else that would put food on their table. When her mother got sick, Maya had nursed her for 3 years while working full-time and putting herself through a business diploma program at night. She knew how to endure. She knew how to survive. So she wiped the tears from her face, straightened her spine, and started walking until she found a youth hostel that would let her stay for a week with the little cash she had left. 3 months later, Maya's life looked nothing like she had imagined, but she was still standing. She had found work at a convenience store during the day, scanning items and restocking shelves for wages barely enough to cover her rent in a shared apartment with 5 other migrant workers. At night, she worked at Venus Lounge, a high-end nightclub in Gangnam, where the bottles of champagne cost more than she made in a month. Her job was simple in theory: serve drinks, smile at customers, and make them feel important enough to keep ordering. In reality, it meant dodging wandering hands, ignoring crude comments, and pretending she couldn't understand Korean when men said things about her body that made her skin crawl. The club owner, Mr. Park, had hired her specifically because she was different. Exotic, he called her, as if she were a rare bird instead of a human being desperate for employment. He paid her slightly more than the other servers because her presence attracted curious customers who wanted to be served by the black girl, who wanted to take photos with her like she was a tourist attraction. Maya hated every second of it, but she needed every one. She had already been fooled once in Korea, and she refused to let poverty make a fool of her again. On a Friday night in late November, the club was packed with the usual crowd of businessmen celebrating deals and wealthy young people pretending their parents' money was their own achievement. Maya moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency, her face showing nothing of the exhaustion that made her bones ache. She had been working since 6 in the morning and wouldn't finish until 3 a.m., but she couldn't afford to slow down. As she approached a VIP section near the back, she felt the energy shift before she even got close. A group of men in expensive suits sprawled across the leather couches, their laughter too loud and aggressive, their movements careless in the way of people who had never faced real consequences. One of them, a man with gelled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, locked onto Maya as she set down their bottles of whiskey. "Well, well," he said in Korean, his words blurred by alcohol. "They're really importing all types these days, aren't they?" His friends laughed like he had said something clever instead of cruel, and Maya felt her stomach tighten with familiar dread. She tried to step back, but his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Where are you going? We paid good money to be here. The least you can do is entertain us." He yanked her down onto the seat beside him, and Maya's heart started racing like a trapped animal. She looked around frantically for help, for security, for anyone with the authority to intervene. But the other staff members suddenly became very interested in their tasks elsewhere, and Mr. Park stood at the bar counting money with the focus of someone who had perfected the art of selective blindness. "Drink with us," the man commanded, shoving a glass of soju toward her face. "Or are you too good for Korean alcohol?" When Maya shook her head and tried to pull away, he grabbed her jaw, forcing her mouth open and pouring the burning liquid down her throat. Maya choked and coughed, soju spilling down her chin and onto her uniform while the men around the table howled with delight. "Look at her," one of them jeered, his phone out and recording. "She's so dark. Do you think she'd disappear if we turned off the lights? Someone should test that." The words hit harder than a physical blow, cutting through every defense Maya had built around her heart. And suddenly she was on her feet, stumbling away from the booth with tears streaming down her face and her uniform soaked through with alcohol she hadn't wanted to drink. She heard Mr. Park calling after her, his voice sharp with anger about lost tips and upset customers, but she didn't care. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't spend one more second in that space without falling completely apart. She ran blindly through the club, pushing past startled guests and ducking under a velvet rope that marked off a restricted hallway. She tried the first door she found, and when it opened, she stumbled inside and slammed it shut behind her, pressing her back against the wood as sobs tore through her chest. For a long moment, she stood there in the darkness, trying to remember how to pull herself back together, trying to find the strength that had carried her this far. Then a light clicked on, and Maya's eyes flew open to find a man standing across the room. He was tall and lean with sharp features and dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that would have looked careless on anyone less polished. He wore an expensive suit with the jacket discarded and the sleeves rolled up, and he held a glass of amber liquid in one hand. His expression was cold annoyance, his dark eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the crying woman who had invaded his private space. "Who are you?" he demanded in Korean, his voice clipped and precise. When Maya didn't respond, frozen by shock and embarrassment, he switched to English with a crisp accent. "This is a private suite. You need to leave." But Maya couldn't move. Her legs felt like water, and the room was spinning in a way that had nothing to do with the soju she had been forced to drink. She opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, but the words caught in her throat. The man, whose name was Taemin, though she didn't know it yet, set down his glass and crossed the room in 3 long strides. Up close, Maya could see that his eyes weren't entirely cold. There was something else there, something that might have been concern buried beneath layers of carefully constructed indifference. "You're hurt," he said, and it wasn't a question. He could see the red marks on her wrist where fingers had gripped too hard, the alcohol staining her clothes, the devastation written across her face. What happened next would change both of their lives in ways neither could have predicted. Maya, operating on pure instinct and desperation, and the strange sense of safety she felt in this man's presence, reached up and pulled his face down to hers. She kissed him with all the pain and loneliness and fear that had been building inside her since the moment she stepped off that plane, and Taemin, shocked and perhaps a little drunk himself, kissed her back. It started as an escape, a way to feel something other than worthless, but it became something more as the night unfolded. They barely spoke, communicating instead through touch and gasps and the universal language of two broken people seeking comfort in each other. When Maya woke the next morning, tangled in silk sheets with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, Taemin was already gone. She found her clothes folded neatly on a chair and an envelope containing enough cash to cover 3 months of rent, but no note, no phone number, no indication that the night had meant anything beyond a transaction.